All right, this weekend we are back in the Old Testament for one of our miracles, and another one that probably a number of you maybe haven't heard before. It's one of my favorite ones, though. It's from the Old Testament book of First Kings, and it tells us about a story in the life of Elijah the prophet. And what was happening at this point in time is God had sent Elijah to speak against some very evil kings who were dead set against the ways of God. And so he had a pretty rough time of it, often facing persecution, opposition along the way. He sometimes felt like he was the only one. In fact, on one occasion, he was told by God in the first part of this chapter, chapter 17, to prophesy about a drought that was to come. But during that time, God was going to take care of him by having wild animals bring him food, ravens, while he was hiding out in the middle of the wilderness by a little river. But eventually, that little river ran dry. And so God told him to go to another town. And he said this, I love these words, I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. Now, as the story goes, we come to find out that the widow probably isn't aware of this. In fact, Elijah just shows up and sees this woman. God makes clear to him that she's the one. And so he goes up and he says, hey, what are you doing? And she says, I'm getting some sticks here, gathering together, and I'm about to make some food. And he said, well, why don't you make me some bread as well? And then he learns the tragic condition that she was facing. She was going home to use the last little bit of flour, last little bit of oil, these few sticks she could gather to make a final meal for her and her son. She was a widow, her son an orphan, at least on the father's side. And from all that she could tell, it was the last meal that they would share. So desperate was her situation that she couldn't see another way out, no hope. And yet God moved in that moment. And Elijah declared to her, no, if you go and prepare this food for me, your flour will never run out and your oil never run dry. And in fact, that's what God did, providing for her, her son, and Elijah for the rest of the time that he was there until the drought was over. Have you ever ran into a moment where it seemed like there was no hope? Couldn't see a way out, seemed like a dead end, like you were stuck, and you wondered, what am I supposed to do next? In this case, what becomes clear is that God wants us to trust his promises, that he will be with us, he'll never forsake us, he will provide for all of our needs. Sometimes it's harder than others when we're stuck in a dead end without any hope. And yet, all the while, and we can see this in this story, God is working. And he is working for our good, doing what he alone can do for us. So what's he asking you to do as you trust in him?